Welcome everybody to another episode of Agency Automators. Today it's going to be really intimate and special because it's just Jordan and I. How you doing today, Jordan?
Doing great, man. I'm really excited to see what you've been brewing up.
Today we're going to walk through a tool that I just built for a subset of our clients at 2 Octobers, and it all started with a really great email, which with a little side note. Hey, if you were able to develop a product for smart detailing sites to sign up for stock alerts, we would happily pay or subscribe to that.
So,
I
so
didn't know what
Noah,
the heck he meant, so I asked for details, and it quickly turned into an idea where when the user goes to a website and they go to a bike product detail page, if they don't see a size or a color or something that they want, they can open up a pop-up form and pick the size that they want. They can add their email address and then get notified when that item's back in stock. And what's really special about this year, and especially all the conversations that we've had with agency automators, is that we've had some pretty amazing people on our show. And how do you think I leveraged tools, or which conversations in our past do you think I was able to leverage to build this? Who do you think started it all off?
um, I would say David Sottimano for
Oh my
sure.
God, cloud functions,
Yeah.
cloud functions, cloud functions, cloud functions. So so one of our clients said, "Hey, can you build this tool?" And I started trying to think through how to do it, and I came up with a workflow where we're grabbing page values on a product detail page, setting them up to a database. Probably makes sense if I just show you the lucid chart to go over that flow, right? The way that I saw this working would be that there would be a pop-up on the client website, and that submits data to a cloud function, which then gets put into two different what are called cloud task queues. I had no idea what cloud tasks were, and I learned a little bit about them, and I'll go into those in more detail because they're super, super cool. And by pushing data into the cloud task queue, it then creates like a list of jobs that you can then push off to different endpoints, whether they're in Google Cloud or even outside of Google Cloud. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So with one of these task queues, we push to a cloud function that writes to Bigquery. And the thing that's neat about task queues is that if the task does not send a 200 series response code back to the task queue, then the cloud task reassigns that again to another cloud function. So you have retries built in, which is super cool and scalable.
So did you have to build that functionality with retries, or does it just kind of happen automatically?
I'll show you inside cloud tasks
Okay.
because there's a whole bunch of settings that you set up for each of what are called your cloud task queues. Like in this specific diagram, we have two cloud task queues. One which is a BigQuery task queue, and the other one which is an emailer task queue. And so doing the emailer task queue was probably overbuilt because there's very little that can fail other than having a bad email address when you go to do node mailer. But it just made sense to me to do it anyway. I'm not saying it was the smartest way to do it, but that's how we decided to do it. And all of these cloud functions, and just to be clear, we used Node.js as the underpinning language to build everything out. We didn't use Python or some other language. So that was the first piece where the data goes from the website and gets into our BigQuery database. And then the second piece to this is what we call the daily cron job. And basically what it does, it's powered by a tool called Cloud Scheduler, which I'll show you how to use it. And for those of us in our audience who are using Google Cloud Project, Cloud Scheduler is a really neat tool. You can set up to 3 cloud schedulers or schedules or cron jobs for free inside Google Cloud Project. And as you go over that limit, it costs 10 cents per month per cron job. And what that means is if you have a cron job that runs once every 5 minutes all month, that counts as one. That's not, you're not getting charged per run, you're getting charged per task.
That's pretty affordable.
Yeah, isn't that neat?
Yeah, I like it.
So this says that the cron triggers every hour. We're not running it every hour, we're running it once a day. They're super, 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 super easy to set up. If you've ever set up a cron job, it'll look pretty standard to you. You're setting up the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, and the month. Is that right? Or is it day of the week? Wait, minute, hour, day of the week of the month? Month? I don't know what all the
I thought you
are.
had it right the first time.
Yeah, I get confused. But what this does is every day at 5:05 a.m. in this time zone, it runs. And what it does is it starts a task that's at a target. And you have different choices. You can do a normal HTTP response. You can do a pub sub. You can do App Engine.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the type, whoops, I'm not going to, fuck that. I'm not doing pub sub. You can hit a specific URL, and then you can do a post if you want. You can do a get, a put, a delete, a patch, options. And for funsies, I'm sending a post there. And I think you can also define your service account and the audience, which is always the same URL as your URL. Mm. And so this is how I run my daily cron. And again, you get 3 of these per not project, but per your account. And if you decide to add more, you see how easy it is to do it. And they're only 10 cents a piece per month as you get over that 3 per month. But that's the architecture. It's 2 steps. And then there's a third step, actually, a third cron that I don't have diagrammed out, but I can show you that using a tool called DBT, which is really neat. I don't know what I'm going to do if I move out of BigQuery, because DBT is so amazing. Basically, how I can use it is I can deduplicate all my rows. I can also transform the data, like anyone who enters an uppercase email. I can put all that stuff in lowercase. I can also create MD5 hashes, which are combinations of different fields, in order to give me amazing tracking all the way through the whole flow, which I'll show you, which I'm really quite proud of. Okay, so that's the architecture. I showed you the pop-up. And then any questions so far? Feedback?
A high level one. So yeah. I know you and I have gone back and forth offline about serverless versus non-serverless. So I'm curious, why did you decide to go the serverless route?
Versus building like an Express app? Okay, fantastic question. So if I look at this architecture again, the thing that I liked about going serverless was that it enables me to manage retries without me having to code them. I can use cloud task queues to manage the retries and just connect a variety of different cloud functions together, each one that has like a finite piece of functionality. And over time, I can add and remove cloud functions without too much work. And I did this as an exercise because I feel like building a tool that has an architecture, especially like this daily cron, like this lends itself pretty well to thinking about building a crawling framework. Like imagine having to crawl the SERPs.
Are you hinting at something, Noah?
What I'm thinking about is fixing that tool skunkbot that I was working on in September. And basically imagine you have a sitemap list. You grab a sitemap, you take all of those URLs and you push them into BigQuery. And then you then grab all those rows out of BigQuery, you make a task queue of all those URLs that you need to crawl, perform logic on them, update the status of that crawl in BigQuery, and then maybe email you the results of said crawl. So that's why this framework is really exciting to me, because it's not like, it's amazing that we get to like help our clients make money. And that's like the e-commerce application. But I see this as the foundation for building however many different tools down the road we want to do it. And that's why I think Postgres makes sense, because Postgres is made for doing transactional reads and writes. And it's easy to hook up to Data Studio, which means that it'll have nice, fast reporting too on that side. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. Okay, so that's the architecture. And then there's some more pieces to like, all right, so what does the client get? How can they interact with the data? And I want to share like lessons that I learned along the way, because there's definitely some lessons of how solutions can be brittle versus robust and long-standing. Originally, I scoped the project so that when I built out the tool, it would be fully automated. I'd always thought of it as like, oh, I'll build an automated tool that just automatically sends people emails when stuff gets back in stock. I thought it was a huge value add. I thought it would like increase conversions and increase revenues on a site by anywhere from 3 to 8%, something in that range. And when I showed this page to clients, they thought it was cool, but they also were really keyed in on working the list and actually interacting with the data so that they could then manually go reach out to the clients. And this points to like the needs of like doing really good work on the front end when you're scoping a project. This whole part of the process speaks to me potentially not doing a great enough job at that, right? Because I would have built it better round one had I done a better job scoping it. But anyway, what's cool about this is it tracks the date that people added themselves to the list, whether or not the tool has automatically reached out to them, the brand, and clients wanted that so that they could track demand for specific brands and specific items so that they could do better job ordering in the future. It also has the email address for the individual user. It's tracking all the variation level data for each product that they added. It's got a link to the website so that the person who's looking at this report could go like do a spot check to make sure that if they're checking inventory for the item that they'll actually be able to find, just make sure it's the right one. Clients wanted to be able to search by MPN, the manufacturer's product number, so we added that to the chart. And then this shows the last date that the item was checked by the tool. This column is the hashed column. And this is something that I'm really proud of. Do you ever do something you're like crazy stoked on? And you get the little mad scientist thought process he's going? Well, this was my mad scientist moment. And it's like, as a digital marketer, we always want to track everything, right? And this column, the hashed column, is a hashed, it's hashed data that's a combination of all this stuff that's necessary to produce a unique identifier for every single row. And then when the user clicks that email, the call to action in the email to go back to the website, that's this hashed as part of that UTM parameter. So I can tie revenue to the specific user. Does that make you jealous a little bit?
I fucking love it, dude.
Uh,
Mind my French, but holy, I love it.
yeah,
Because then, like, at the end of the day, you have a direct line to this tool and
yeah,
actual revenue figures.
totally. Which, if you're building a tool, you really want to be able to point to and say, like, hey, this actually made you some money. So we can track, we've got analytics events that are tracking form opens, form submits, every time an email is clicked, how many transactions we get in Google Analytics, and revenue out of analytics. Pretty cool, right?
I like it.
So clients complain and they're like, oh, I can't save this. I can't interact with this. So I showed them like some hokey things. You could export it to Sheets. And they're like, yeah, that's not quite good enough. So, so then I like iterated some more, right? And I don't know if I showed you this. This is really neat. So it's got some neat little touches to it. Number one, I've got my frozen first column. It's the little things, right? I've got my frozen first row. So it's easy for people to like look at it. Now, this was something that was really interesting to me. Um, so they said, oh, I want to be able to update the data, right? So I set it up so that the client can edit these four columns, the J, K, L, and M column, right? And then this has AppScript, which is interacting with BigQuery. And what it's doing is I can pull fresh data into the sheet and I can push data from the sheet up to BigQuery. And
Hey, I like that.
you like that?
Yeah.
Now, BigQuery has some limitations, which I didn't know if you were aware of this, but one of the things about BigQuery is that you have there's a daily limit as to how many reads and writes you can do to a table per day. Did you know that?
I did not. And that's quite surprising
Yeah.
considering that BigQuery is for big data, right?
Yep.
Like millions of rows a day.
Right. But that limit is coming via jobs.
Okay, so for those who don't know jobs, do you mind explaining?
Okay. So when you're trying to get BigQuery to do something via an API, you do that by passing a function to BigQuery, which oftentimes is a job. And I'll show you how we did it how we do it with our R2. There's basically two functions that we're doing via AppScript, right? Number one, we're pulling data into the sheet, and we're also pulling data or pushing data to BigQuery. And the way that we're doing the push is pushing a post up to a cloud function, and then that cloud function is interacting directly with BigQuery.
Okay, so I got a question there. Why are you using a cloud function as an intermediary between AppScript and BigQuery?
Good question. I had the function built already as part of, and I was just using a piece of functionality that I had already built.
Okay.
I was just passing data in the same way that I was passing it in that serverless flow. So it was easy for me to implement. And I had to get this working quickly because I had clients that were waiting and they needed to be able to edit the sheet and save data. So I did it in like MVP fashion versus smartest execution fashion.
And with that being said, I do have to give you a hat tip for using Google Sheets as an interface rather than building one out from scratch. I love that.
I do too, except it's going to go away, and I am going to embrace
Oh.
your philosophy over time. So Jordan and I have these discussions that talk about how to build an app. We've both started using Node a lot in 2020, and we've both gone through different iterations of how we like to use it. Uh, I built a tool on App Engine, which was an Express-driven tool that had all kinds of functionality, and I found it a little confusing passing data back and forth between all the different functions, all the callbacks, dealing with all the async nature of things, to the point where I was like, fuck that. I'm just going to have all these cloud functions pushing data back and forth. And that's why I didn't do it Jordan's way. And Jordan, what's your philosophy and what you like about Express apps?
So I started opposite of Noah. I started with completely a serverless design architecture, but debugging was an absolute shit show of a nightmare, mind my French. And, because I don't develop full time, it was chewing up a ton of time. So I ended up switching from a serverless design architecture to a non-serverless architecture. So you actually using Express, sitting on a server in the traditional web app kind of way.
And for those of us who don't use Express, can you say what Express is?
Good. So Express is a very lightweight, unopinionated framework for developing Node.js apps. That's kind of like the high level description of how I would explain Express.
And it allows you to pretty quickly spin up a server, right?
Yeah. I love the simplicity of it, and I love how easy it is for me to develop, because I actually started programming, at least in Node.js, like years and years ago, and
Yeah.
I started like actually with Express or a derivation of it, and that's kind of what I know, which
Yep.
is, I guess, one of the reasons why I migrated back to it rather than staying with serverless.
Cool. So let's see. So there's two functions on the sheet. One is pushing data to a cloud function that then pushes it up to BigQuery. And this is why our current architecture is not going to be strong enough over time. So BigQuery limits the amount of updates that we can do, other than the DML, which is their language. I forget. Is it data manipulation language? Is that what DML stands for?
Yeah, I think something along those lines.
Yeah. So you can do more than 1,500 updates if you're doing using DML. But if you're using APIs and creating jobs, you're limited to 1,500. So let's say I have a database or a sheet that has 1,000 rows, and I need to update each of those rows. There are 1,000 of my updates used up in one fell swoop, which totally sucks, right? So if you were to move it instead over to a Postgres database or Firebase or anything that's designed to be like a transaction database, it's a much smarter way of architecting it. And that's where we're going versus where we're at. But so in its current iteration, to limit the amount of stuff that's getting updated, the clients put checkboxes next to the rows that they need to push. They then save it to the database, and then they will get they'll get a notification when it's done, which is pretty cool.
And as we wait for it to load, oh, there we go. You are doing, I remember when we were talking, I think a few weeks ago now,
Yeah.
you're doing file uploads, are you not? Versus jobs?
Ooh, good question. That is a load job.
Okay.
And
It
we
is a
should
load
get
job.
into that because people are going to have, they're going to have lots of questions about, the biggest, I feel like the biggest hurdle for me in getting started for all of this stuff was just the simple process of getting data into BigQuery, right? Did you find that to be the stumbling block as you were getting started?
Um, when working with BigQuery or
Just
when programming?
anything. I mean, like that was the biggest thing was I probably spent 2 months learning how to push JSON to BigQuery, how to push CSVs to BigQuery, learning my ways around new line delimited JSON, all that stuff was hard.
So I actually didn't have that problem. For me, it was debugging serverless functions that
Uh,
were just chained together.
nice.
Yeah.
Let's get into that because I think
Yeah.
the dealing with try catch statements was what helped me solve that problem. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. Okay, so they wanted to have an interface, so I built that as an interface. I then understood that 1,500 updates per table meant that my initial architecture of putting all the client data from multiple websites into one table was definitely not going to work. And then I'd have to break each client out to their own table, right? And that'll give
Mhm.
me enough time to move from BigQuery to whatever's next,
Mhm.
Postgres or Firebase.
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking initially I wanted to do Firebase, but I don't know if you've looked at this, but if you go into Data Studio and you look at the inputs, Firebase or Firestore are not one of the out of the box choices.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. Really is
Huh.
right. So what I did find is that there are extensions for Google Cloud wherein you can replicate, I guess, Firebase or Firestore to BigQuery, which I think will be the way that I solve that problem down the road. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah. Though I think you okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry. Continue. Go on.
Um, faster, more. So some challenges that I ran into along the way. Number one, letting a whole bunch of people into your BigQuery, giving them BigQuery permissions at the cloud project level is incredibly nerve wracking and definitely not best practice approach. So, and by the way, I also found that the standard big cloud project roles do not give the appropriate permissions that allow people to do it if they're outside of your organization.
Hmm.
So what that means is if Noah at 2 Octobers wanted to get fresh data, no problem, because it's in my cloud project in my organization. I gave people who needed access to this sheet and to be able to save to the database, I gave them BigQuery permissions with the normal standard roles inside Cloud Project, and they kept getting errors. It wouldn't work.
Okay.
So is that shocking to you? Because it's shocking to me.
Yeah. That's weird.
So here's why I think that that's happening.
Hmm.
Or, uh, well, I don't know about the why, but what I found in the analysis part of it that was really confusing is that AppScript doing stuff directly to BigQuery. BigQuery is what's known as an advanced service when
Okay.
you look at AppScript documentation. And because it's an advanced service, there were things about there were things that made it so that um, it made it so that I thought that because it was an advanced service, that's why the users were not able to auth in and use the tool. But I think it's the fact that I had to give granular level access permissions, which is like managing BigQuery jobs, managing, reading, updating, tables and data sets,
Hmm.
and maybe even IAM permissions in order to not to edit, but for it to be able to read their permissions. So there was a lot of like granular level cloud project stuff that was pretty funky. Okay, I think the neatest thing is kind of diving into the cloud functions. I
Hmm.
don't know if you guys remember, but when David Sottimano showed us one, I'll show you a pretty simple one. Basically, we've got a cloud function name, which is the RMB unsubscribe. It's got my request, it's got my response. notice I'm only allowing the request method of get to have the ability to interact with my Cloud function. I'm not letting it do puts, posts, patches, or deletes,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty cool. I thought I was pretty clever. That's like called reading the documentation, right? So I've got my async function, and inside that, I think it's best practice to have a try, and then you've got your catch, so that you're catching all your errors. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that this works is that I'm giving cores like cross origin requests to happen, and then I'm passing in a domain that I want to. This references which table I need. Actually, you know what? This actually is no longer relevant. Okay, so we're passing into this function. Uh, the email that people get has an unsubscribe link, and when they click it, it sends a post to this Cloud function, and we're grabbing the table to unsubscribe from. We're grabbing that hashed value as that unique identifier, and then we're also grabbing the email address. And so all we're doing is updating our table to set status as unsubscribed where the hashed equals hashed. And the benefit is just really neat because we get to unsubscribe people from their email, and we can also unsubscribe them manually with our Google Sheets tool. And then here is an example of doing a Bigquery query. Oh, I think this is an example of a DML and not doing a job, Jordan.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay. Huh.
You seem so surprised with
Well,
your own code.
no, it's not that. I'm such a dumbass. Well, watch. The reason I'm confused is I think.
No, you have another query right there.
Fuck, I
46
thought it
to
was a
50.
job. Oh my god! I don't have to update anything. Did I just break shit? Oh man, I think I just broke my. Oh my god, Shadow, don't eat that, dude. Leave that alone. Good boy. Good boy. Oh my god, that was like crazy times. So, my thing isn't under architected, and I don't have to worry about it. Oh my god, I'm such a tool. I'm such an idiot. Okay, so I think people will enjoy this. What the hell? So getting back to our simple one.
Simple with quotes wrapped around
Yeah,
it.
simple with quotes, air quoted. So simple JavaScript function. So we have a response. See how it says BigQuery.query?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm including some libraries up here, and I think for people who don't use Node, it's really a great. We should probably like take 17 steps back and just look at this really quickly. So number one, I love using a .env file. It like basically lets you set environmental variables so that people don't have access to things like API keys right in the middle of your code. This is one way of doing it. You require .env config, and then we have constant Google, require the Google APIs. I'm also pulling in their auth library, also pulling in BigQuery. Path is a part of the normal or the standard Node implementation, as is FS, which stands for file system. I'm also using a JSON file that has client data associated with it. And then this is where we're pulling in BigQuery information. Like you have a project for Google Cloud. I have a key file name, which is where my service account credentials are stored. Again, that probably should be in environmental variables, right? If we were
And
being
funny
really
enough, for me, it's an environmental variable, and the reason why is because you taught me how. So I love the irony of how I'm using a coding pattern that you taught me, but you're not following it.
King Hacky McHack over here. And if you were to look carefully, what you'll see is a pattern that David Sottimano taught me, which is anything he wants to trash, he names delete me, which I think is awesome. So I'm embracing refactoring, and I will for sure for this. But anyway, so BigQuery as a constant is where we pull in BigQuery, and we've got our quotes, our parentheses, and inside we've got a little object, which is pulling in basically the project ID plus the credentials to get in there. We find the table, we find the hash, the email. This is the query update. Anyway, so BigQuery does a query, and the query that we're doing is this specific line of code right here. So it's update the project data set actual table, set the field, which is status, to unsubscribed, where the hashed field equals the hashed value that we're passing in. And one of the things that's really neat about this, and when you were telling me about how much trouble you were having debugging serverless functions, so much of that to me was, and the way that I overcame those challenges, because it wasn't easily apparent to me why things were breaking, is just embracing the try-catch pattern and making sure that every single function has a try-catch pattern so that you can catch all your errors. Because were you seeing errors in your logs that were like unhandled rejection, stuff
No.
like that?
I was just seeing code breaking. There were edge cases where the function would run perfectly fine, let's say 19 out of 20 times, and then there'd be this 20th time where it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Also, I realized that I'm a complete idiot, and that when you're saving to BigQuery, there's, I believe the term is, it's the stream, where you save data to BigQuery, but it's not initially accessible through the UI of just previewing the table. So it's held within this this cache, if you will, and after a few moments or minutes or however, it's then kind of saved into that normal database UI that you see. So I didn't quite get that concept throughout my exploration of the serverless design architecture. Sounds good. So for those who don't know what cloud tasks are, what are they?
Fantastic question. Okay, so there's something called a cloud task queue. You pass values into the queue, and when you pass stuff in, it has to be either a buffer or it has to be a base 64 encoded string. Part of that object that you're passing in has to say what the target is. Where's that data going to? And then you pass values to that target, almost like you're feeding data into that cloud function. Mm-hmm. And the task queue basically is like a gatekeeper, and it controls how fast things go, and it can control how many things can happen at the same time.
So Noah, I know I interrogated you when you were first exploring cloud tasks on the difference between this and PubSub. Do you care to explain to listeners the difference?
One of the things is that when you send, PubSub is set up so that there's a publisher, there's a topic, and then there are subscribers to that topic. So you can have data go into a PubSub, and then you can pass that to multiple places. Cloud tasks, data goes into a queue, and it goes to a single target.
Which is where, and the target is actually defined in what you send to the cloud task, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
To the queue. And the thing that's neat, the way that I set this up is I set up multiple cloud task queues. I set up one for Node Mailer because there were rate limits around the emailing functionality. I sent up
and if I may interject here, I think that's also a key difference between tasks and PubSub.
Yeah.
In that with tasks, you can set the number of concurrent messages that are sent. While with PubSub, you don't have any control over it.
Really? I
Yep.
did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, well then I'm glad I did it this way. And so that was on the requests, and then pushing to BigQuery, there's also rate limits on BigQuery in terms of how many concurrent reads and writes can happen. So one thing might have one level of concurrent and max dispatches. A dispatch is how many tasks can we push out to those other endpoints per second.
Mm-hmm.
The concurrent dispatches is how many can we do it at the same time. And then this to me is the magic sauce. This whole thing is the magic sauce because it makes programming so much easier. You basically, with Cloud Functions, you have data going in, data going out. And then you put it into the queue, and then this controls all the retries for you. And you don't have to program that in your Cloud Function. So that's why I like it. I think as a pattern, it makes it so much easier. So you can define what your maximum amount of retries are, what's the maximum duration, the minimum backoff, maximum backoffs, and the doublings. I think the way retries happen is that you say what the minimum amount of time that it backs off in between retries, which is the 0.1 seconds, and then the next time it doubles in the length of time. Bless you, Jordan. So it goes from 0.1 to 0.2 seconds, and then it doubles to 0.4, and then 0.8, and then 0.16. And the maximum backoff is 3,600 seconds. For this specific one, I'm doing a maximum of 2 per second. And I also had a different number in here a second ago. I'm not sure what it was.
Or
But I'm going to hit refresh because I totally don't want to set whatever the value was. Yeah, so it had 3 and 4. Yeah. Whereas in reality, I probably only want to do 1 to 2 per second and only 4 at the same time. I don't know why I set it this way where they're different, but it probably should be the same.
So for our listeners who decide to go down this path, or even with PubSub, from personal experience, make sure you set these rates, because I've actually accidentally DDoS'd one of my clients without setting the rates and the retries. So,
ooh, tell us about that, because that's a great little anecdote. Can you break it? Can you keep it short?
Yeah. So essentially, I was running IBM Watson's NLP API on one of my clients' websites in order to find internal linking opportunities. And me being a dummy, I didn't set the amount of max occurrences, so just kept constantly retrying. And because with PubSub, you don't have that granularity of only doing, say, 2 requests per second. Yeah. So, I hit the website with 10,000 requests, and because they all went in at the same time, they all failed, and because they failed, they retried. So it's just one massive DDoS request from Watson's API.
Yeah, love it. I love the war stories. That's the best part. That's why we always include the question. So, tell us about your best fuck up. In the world of tool building, if we could restrict that question to tool building, Jordan, was this your biggest / best fuck up with tool building?
Oh, hands down in recent history, for sure.
I love how you'd say in recent history.
There has probably been some other major fuck ups that I can't remember for the sake of my sanity. I've forgotten them on purpose.
Okay, so those are cloud tasks. In terms of gotchas, when you have cloud tasks working, you also have to have App Engine turned on. App Engine is another one of those Easter egg products inside the Google, inside the Google Cloud Platform, and it allows you to have all different types of apps that are running, and you don't have to have an actual app turned on, but you have to have App Engine turned on for cloud tasks to work. Otherwise, you'll have cloud tasks that'll go into the queue and nothing will happen. They won't get pushed to the cloud function.
Okay, so this part really confused me because I was talking with James Phoenix
Yeah.
about this.
Yep.
So can you explain a bit more between the relationship of App Engine and Cloud Tasks?
I don't know that I'm going to be able to get us there, and I'll
Okay.
explain why. App Engine, I have used it. Imagine you're building a containerized app, like a Docker instance.
Hmm.
You can host it in App Engine, and it'll run as an app that turns on and turns off depending on settings that you have in App Engine. So you could build your containerized Express app, like you were referring to earlier, run it in App Engine, and turn it on all the time, or just have it turn on when people request it or post
Okay.
to it.
Okay.
And I've used that to build a tool called SkunkBot, which was a super fun process. And I don't quite understand architecturally how Cloud Tasks and App Engine are connected, but I know that you have to have App Engine enabled in order for Cloud Tasks to work.
So it's just having it enabled, not necessarily a container within App Engine running.
Correct. And I thought you had
Interesting.
to have one. Uh,
And that's what I thought as well when when I was chatting with James.
so, and you and I might also be wrong too, and I'll explain what I mean, which is weird. Um, so, in one cloud project, I have an App Engine app that I spent way too much time building. In this cloud project, I went into App Engine, and let's go into it so you can see. I went into App Engine, and um, you'll notice if I go into the instances that there is nothing there. And at any rate, when you go into App Engine, my memory is that there is a screen that says, hey, learn how to deploy a function. Here's instructions on how to deploy an App Engine function. And it basically console logs hello world.
Okay.
It's like a 3-line thing
Hmm.
that I think I ran through that tutorial in this App Engine, and I know that I do not have an instance running. This is the one that does all that input work where the website sends data to the Cloud Function and then it creates the two tasks, the task queues. And I think that that would be really interesting for people to see. When they look at this, they're going to notice that I need to refactor code a little bit. But so in essence, we're passing in a lot of product data. We're grabbing the item name, the item ID, the brand, the variation data, the product category, category ID, blah, blah, blah. We're grabbing all kinds of stuff. We're also hashing out a bunch of the fields to create our unique identifier. And then you were asking about loading data into BigQuery. And this is kind of interesting. And I took kind of a hacky approach, and I wish there was a better way to do it. I suppose I could just stream data in, but I didn't want to pay for the stream. And I'm not pushing a ton, so it's not like there's going to be a lot of cost, but the free way to do it is just to load data in with a specific format. And the way to do that is to basically push your data into a CSV, store your CSV in the temp folder up in the cloud. I just make another CSV, put it into the temp folder, and then I run a BigQuery function called load local file. And here's a load job. So that's actually a job.
So to clarify, you're taking the saved CSV file and
Yep,
then essentially adding it to a BigQuery function that pushes it up to BigQuery.
correct. And you can see
And
there.
I know in our previous conversations between you and I,
Mhm.
we've talked about the temp folder for Google Cloud Functions and how there's a few caveats to that.
Oh,
Mind
yeah,
explaining to our listeners?
absolutely. I make a row. I then use something called append file sync. And what that does is I'm making inside of the temp directory, I'm creating a file with the website's name, today's date, and CSV, and I'm pushing the row data into that file. And I'm putting it into the temp path. And this is the important piece about it. When most people are doing file paths inside Node, this is what they're used to seeing as a pattern. You're used to seeing, I want to store my stuff inside single quotes, period, / and then the file name. And what that means is that this creds.json is in the same level as this script that's running. Now, when you're pushing stuff into the temp directory in Google Cloud, there is no period. It's just single quotes / TMP. That was the gotcha.
And from what I recall, this TMP directory is cleared out each time the function runs.
Exactly.
And it only lives for the length of that function being ran.
Absolutely. Now, remember, data's coming from the website into this function. You'll notice that I have some retries in this particular function. I know I was all like, oh, the best thing about cloud functions is the ability to not handle retries. Well, I decided to handle retries in this particular function because I'm like inconsistent at best. Okay, so here we have a constant job, and you'll see that it's part of that asynchronous pattern because it says await table ID, and then I'm loading. And what am I loading? I'm loading this file that we built higher up. And then I wait for that to happen, and then I get some data back. And you'll see that this is the good rows, is the amount of rows that got pushed up into Bigquery, and I have a job ID that I don't reference anywhere else, and I don't even know why I'm grabbing it. Does that sound like anything you've ever built?
I feel like every function I have has that somewhere.
And I showed this to David Sottimano, and he was kind of laughing at how, I think he used the term flimsy, if I'm not mistaken. I can make it better. But basically, if there's errors, and if it's one of these two errors, then I'm handling them. And if it's one of these two errors, here it is down here. It says, where are we? Okay, down here. If I have errors, and if they are one of these internal service errors or 500 series errors coming back from Bigquery, then I'm going to try and load it again. I can't handle a 300 level error or a 400 level error, because those are ones that are like, you don't have access, you're not allowed in, or that's a wrong URL, you can't go there. Like, there's nothing that I can do to handle that or fix it that I'm aware of anyway. Mm-hmm. So then after we run, we remove that file. I also have some logging going on so that we can troubleshoot stuff if things are broken. This is a pattern that people might enjoy. Like if there's an error with the BigQuery, so that I can go in stack driver logs and look at this. I can see my error code, the actual error code details, plus I have a link right into the BigQuery docs so that I can go look and see what I did to match. Like if it says, oh, it's a 308 error or whatever the error code is, this will have a link that'll take me right to that table so I can find it. Here's where the cloud task queues are. And this I think is for people who haven't used Cloud Task before. I think this will be the piece that's the most interesting. You'll see that right here I'm running a function called create task with token, and I'm passing in a variety of pieces of information, and I'm declaring the type of task that we're building, and I'll show you how it works. So this is where we define the function. These are the things that it expects to get pushed in, and you have to declare the type. Again, big try catch statement, everything we want to run when everything works right is going in the try. Anything that we want to that we want to run no matter what. If there's an error, it goes in the catch. I define my project, the name of the specific queue. Remember, I showed you guys the task queues. Specific tasks are getting pushed into that task queue so that those retry rules and backoff rules will apply to this task that we're building. I also have to define the target of where that data is going to go. I'm logging stuff just because in dev, I wanted to make sure I was doing it properly. I also wanted it to have a delay before the email gets sent out. So I added a 20-second delay. So you then define the parent, which is the queue path, which is, it adds all three things together, which is your project, your location, and the queue that it needs to go to. And this part is really important. Well, these next two pieces are really important, which are how we define the task and how we define the payload and what that request looks like. And this is where I spent way too many hours bug hunting. And it turned out that the real problem, I think, was not having App Engine turned on. So let's see. So I have my task, and it's basically an object. And inside, I have to define what type of request I'm making, what the method is, if there are any headers. And you'll notice I'm sending a buffer down here that's a JSON stringified payload. So I'm including the headers so that the Cloud Function knows how to translate this buffer when it gets it. I also have to pass the URL or that target for the Cloud Function. I also have to say what my token is, like what's the service account email that is associated with this. This is that payload. And I actually need to give Dale McGeorge a huge hat tip here because he taught me a really neat pattern with doing Node Mailer. And it's this. Originally, I was like, oh, I'll have Node Mailer send out like welcome aboard emails, and then later down the road, I'll send out another email. And I built a Cloud Function out for each of those emails. And Dale and I were looking at my code, and he's like, well, I'm not even going to try and do his accent because he's Australian and I'll butcher it. But he was like, you could just pass the template ID, and then you could have like different IDs that are like in that Cloud Function, and then like you could have as many templates as you want up there, and you don't have to rebuild the code at all. And I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of like way smarter than the way I did it. So now I'm passing in that template ID, which is the thanks for signing up, and then I'm also passing in the hashed, which is going. I don't know why I'm sending the hash. Oh, I'm sending the hashed. I don't remember why I'm pushing it in that particular case. This little section is critical to get right. If payload task.http request.body, we're basically we're creating a property inside the HTTP request, and it's a buffer from open parentheses JSON.stringify payload. There's another way to build it with a base 64 encoded string, but this was easier for me and I got it working, so I would recommend that you build it this way. Questions on that?
No, because I think you're going to explain it as you continue going on.
Cool. If I want to have a delay, this is that part that handles that variable that I put up there that was 20 seconds. If you have a delay, you can add that part to the object, task.scheduleTime, seconds, in seconds plus date now divided by 1,000. So it'll add that as a delay. I define what my request is that's going up to the cloud task queue. And then here's where I actually make the request. And then I can log out that the task was created. And then down here, you'll notice here's that catch that catches all the stuff that's happening in that try.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's the catch for the major statement. And you'll also see that it's a res.status 200. And that finishes, that's what goes back to the website and tells that form that the form was successfully submitted.
Nice.
So those are some neat lessons learned along the way of like how to kind of tie these together. I'm wondering what else to dive into. A lot of this stuff's really pretty simple. Some of it is more complex, but like here's another cloud function which is updating BigQuery. And this will be nice to see if I did a job here. No, I did not. It's just a query. Wow, that's amazing, Jordan. I'm not going to have to rebuild my tool. You have no idea. I was like talking to people and feeling like I had another 20 hours to invest. And if Nico, my boss, is watching this, none of it would have happened on company time, I promise. I would have done it all at night for fun. But I am overjoyed that I'm not going to have to re-engineer this. It's going to make my life so much easier. What are some other lessons that I learned so the major time sucks in this project were understanding how to get items successfully submitting to the task queue, and getting that app engine turned on was at least 10 hours of troubleshooting.
Holy guacamole.
Maybe not that much, but it was like, the problem was I kept talking to people who are like experts in this, and they kept saying, oh, I don't know why it's not working. I'm not sure why it's not working. I'm not sure why it's not working. And it was just as simple as turning app engine on. That was it. And if you read the documentation, it says that you can use Cloud Task Queues to push data either to App Engine or to any HTTP endpoint that you want. And I was like, well, I'm not sending anything to App Engine. Why would I need App Engine turned on? Mm-hmm. That was a massive time suck. The other massive time suck was figuring out, parsing why stuff wasn't successfully being received. And I couldn't tell if it was me not having the structure of that request set right with the buffer or base 64 encoded string. So I kept like making changes and redoing it and redoing it. And it was really just that App Engine piece. But I think the neatest part about this whole process was getting a sense of, in February of this year, and right now it's November 24th. In February of this year, you and I understood the concepts around getting data from Google Sheet up into BigQuery. And I think I had a little more hands-on experience maybe than you did at that point. Mm-hmm. And going from there and then learning how to do Node as another building block to add to AppScript was really cool. And when I started this project, I thought that I was going to build it. It looked like a pretty simple implementation that I could do it all in AppScript. And once I understood that checking the inventory status was going to take longer than the AppScript runtime would allow, that's what forced me down the Node route, and made me learn how to do cloud functions. But what's really amazing about this is that I can take the lessons learned from this and turn it into a crawling tool with this pattern. And a crawling tool to do all kinds of stuff. And don't just think of it as a crawling tool. It's like building an awareness and an understanding on how to build any long-running task was the goal. And I think that we've come close to solving that. Not quite there.
I love all the learnings, and I love all the sharing, Noah.
Thoughts, questions, feedback? Do you think anyone would get a kick out of this?
Heck yeah. It's really insightful, especially for those who are deep into the weeds. There's a lot of caveats and, small things that make a huge difference, right? Like perfect example is that App Engine, or from what I mentioned, and making sure not to DDoS one of your clients.
Did you just call that a small thing?
No. I'm
Yeah,
small thing. I'm talking about the App Engine thing.
yeah,
Big thing. I'm talking about mice.
yeah,
My
yeah.
fuck up. Yeah. So, as I kind of alluded to before, I was formerly playing with serverless Google Cloud Functions, and now I've switched over to an Express app. So, um, what I've been building is a Slackbot tool that allows my team and I to make better decisions, pull new interesting types of data, and crunch it. So I mentioned one before about how we're using IBM Watson. We are also starting to scrape SERPs and pull that data into Google, into BigQuery, so that we can analyze and understand what types of opportunities are out there on a SERP by SERP level across, say thousands of keywords.
Oh,
And more recently, what we've been playing with is Lighthouse.
mm,
So trying to understand, okay, if what does page speed look like? What does web core vitals look like across a large set of URLs?
yeah.
So it's been very fun trying to learn to code all this and wrap it into something that's actually useful.
Isn't it amazing how far we've come in just a year?
It blows my mind how many leaps and bounds we've made. Like I was, I mean, this isn't a good metric to use, but I was looking at my Git commits on my GitHub account. It was like, holy crap, I did a lot of coding this year, and if I compared it to 2019, it's like sparse and nothing.
Mm. Well, one of the coolest things that I've been able to do in a long time was hang out with Ben Collins on Monday or Tuesday. When was it? Tuesday of last week. And I took one of his courses, which was like app script automation, in August of 2019. And about 2/3 of the way into the course, I quit. And I quit the course. I didn't quit, but I just usually when I take a course, I'll like learn, and then I'll go, oh my god, that means I can do fill in the blank, and I'll just like stop doing the course and go build something.
Mm-hmm.
And with his course, I learned how to do some automation with APIs and stuff, and then I built that Google My Business Q&As add-on. That was in September of 2019, and then you had your Google Post tool, right? And then that became the foundation for what is now Postomatic. And that was built in all AppScript in March, April, May, really March, April, May, I guess, of
Mm-hmm.
2020. So AppScript was like where I was doing almost everything. And then in April, that talk with David, I think it was April something, that was like, and then when I discovered Node Package Manager, and you just open up Node Package Manager and you go like, what is it, npm .js, right? And you go like
Mm-hmm.
this and you go Google Search Console, no, Google Trends, and you're like, what? Oh my god, oh my god, I can do stuff with Google Trends like David showed us, or Google Search Console, or BigQuery, or pick your package, and just hook into functionality. And just the amount that you can do faster is just mind-boggling with this.
Mm-hmm.
So I know everybody's into Python, but counter argument is if you do JS and if you come from front-end web dev to dealing with data, Node is not a super bad choice. It's probably less efficient at doing big data, but it is still super fun. Cool. All right. So this might be our tying up 2020 post,
Mm-hmm.
even though we have a couple more coming up. Cool. Jordan, this rock. Thanks so much, dude.
No problem. Thank you, Noah. Thank you very much for
Anytime.
sharing.
Peace.